Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for following us today here on LinkedIn Live. It's really great to have a number of guests here with me and also my dear co-host, Martin Duffy. Martin?
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning and good evening, depending on what part of the world you're joining us from.
And I will make sure that our live broadcast will be shared on a number of channels. And with us today, we have two renowned experts in their respective fields. I would start by alphabetical order, Elise Keith. Elise is, I think, when anyone asks me anything about meetings and every reference sources, I will immediately think about Elise Keith because she's just a complete resource of all things meeting, and I consider her to be one of the most living meeting experts today. So it's a pleasure to have Elise Keith with us. 7 a.m. where she is from, and recovering from a snowstorm. Okay, and Pilar, it's really a pleasure to have Pilar here with us. Pilar Orti is a renowned specialist in remote work. She's also an excellent group facilitator, so she combines her facilitation skills with the project management required for companies to become virtual and remote. And this is pretty relevant these days, as I'm sure we're going to talk about this plenty. So welcome all, and over to you, Martin, if you want to say something, and then our dear guests.
Yeah, I suppose the general theme that we thought might be useful, given the expertise that both you have, Elise and Pilar, is the whole idea of productivity with online collaborations, and maybe just to explore that in a little bit more detail. Everybody has been almost forced into the online collaboration space. Everybody probably feels they're starting to get used to it after about 6 months or a year of being in that space now. But we thought it might be interesting just to explore a little bit the whole concept of productivity. Has there been productive gain? Has there been loss? Is it all sustainable? And to explore some of those ideas based on your respective experiences.
Good.
So where to begin?
Yes.
I just had a funny dream about this, actually, and it's like 6 a.m. here, so it's very fresh. But productivity, man, it's in the virtual space and in the world that we've worked into, that's certainly something that has increased for many. And with it, the train ride to Burnoutville has also been growing up quite well. I'm sure, Pilar, you're probably seeing similar things, right?
Yeah, I can think of, I won't be able to name them, but I can think of many surveys that have come up where with the surprise that productivity had either stayed the same as it was before the pandemic and even increased. And this is very surprising, not because of the remote work aspect, but because of the working from home during a pandemic aspect and the economic crisis, which I wonder also whether that is something, is that people really have been wanting to be seen as achieving whatever they had to achieve at all costs, because sometimes we might think our job is on the line if not in this particular. So I think it's proving that you can be productive when working away from others, but also I wonder all the other psychological stuff that's really behind this.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, doesn't that throw up, I suppose, for me, that elicits two observations. One is the assumption that might have existed that if people are not in the office, they're not going to work. They're not going to be working. So if productivity increases when people are away from the office, so then that says something really positive to the underlying human condition of, in general, we all want to be positive, constructive, productive. But I think, Elise, you touched on it there. Really, there's a question of at what cost, isn't there? And that's something we should all probably pay a lot of attention to.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the productivity increases are because people who work well. I mean, so there's another little tidbit I was reading, yesterday, and they were looking at whether or not you should impose more rules, right? Because often when you've got a productivity problem, you're like, okay, well, we need to make people be in their chairs from 8 to 5. That's a very common fear-based reason people don't let folks work from home, because they can't see them. and what we'll do instead is we'll make them be on 8 to 5 or 8 to 1700 in the virtual space. They'll all be logged on or whatever. But it's really only about 3% of your workforce in any given place that's going to be flouting whatever rules you have, for the most part. In most sort of advanced or knowledge-based workplaces. And when folks went home, all of a sudden their commute became available work time, and their walk around the block became available work time, and it takes them like 3 seconds to get to the refrigerator, so they don't need a very long lunch break, and productivity goes up, and their ability to do anything else, not so much. So it's pretty rough.
There's also the aspect that everything else, well, at least here in London, everything else has also been closed down. So it's not that people are working from home, it's that people are working from home and they're not going out as much. They're not being as distracted. Not distracted. They're not doing much else. And some people maybe work is what they want to be doing, because it's what's keeping them engaged, what's keeping them busy, what's keeping them connected to others, because there's also that. We're looking also for connection through the work. So yeah, maybe that is also adding to people continuing, hopefully, to focus on the right stuff, because that's what productivity is also. It's doing the right things that we need to be doing. So not just being busy and output driven.
Let me just throw here in this table something that shocked me the other day. I have a good friend of mine. I'm not sure she's watching this, but she works in a large insurance company, and she will say, "Oh, I hate when we are in confinement, we are doing remote work, because no one lights up the camera. So camera's always off." Say, what? And it's so bad to have meetings with everybody cameras off. And so why so? Oh, because of bandwidth issues, in a certain way, the participants in the meeting are using a virtual network that it's not able to get the bandwidth enough for audio and video, a virtual private network from the company. So how about that, Elise and Pilar? Isn't it too bad to know that people are still meeting without video on?
It is. There are times you can do it, but at least having some video time in your week for that connection reason, right? And for that higher bandwidth in terms of human bandwidth, in terms of being able to see expressions and have that impression is a great thing. We did an event not too long ago with Scott Wharton, who's the VP of video for Logitech, and he had a great tip on this. So if you're doing video, but you've got bandwidth problems, it turns out the human eye is more forgiving of low quality video than we are of low quality audio. So his tip was this. His tip was to go ahead and leave the camera on, but then for your audio, call in using like a cell phone. Yeah. And separate those so that the bandwidth is all given to the video, and maybe it's choppy, but the voice sounds clear because it's coming from a different line. So there are ways around it if you are in a low tech environment, that way, low bandwidth environment.
I think also that you can turn the video on to check in, and then if a couple of people are having problems, just turn it off, because some people might thrive better without video on, especially if you're thinking of some teams where there's 9, 10, 12 people, and you're really looking there and you feel like you have to look like this, because that's another thing, is that I think we need to start being more gentle with each other and not expect everyone to be like this all the time, because we can be doing this, we can be doing that, we can be listening, we can be writing down. Yeah. Doesn't mean we're not there. So I think that turning off the camera sometimes is really liberating. So I think that's a really good idea. And if the tech is getting in the way, if you have a really bad connection, and turning off the video and just listening, and maybe checking in and out with video at the beginning and at the end, just to get that little hello, good to see you bit, then I think that's perfectly fine. And I mean, I think it's great to be able to switch a video on, but I also think, as someone who was working online a lot before pandemic and after, I'm videoed out, because everyone who meets online wants to have the video on, which before it wasn't the case. And so I'm actually going for the phone a lot more for people in the UK, because for me, this is great, because it's a little bit of broadcast. I haven't seen you guys in ages. I haven't met Martin. But for people who I talk to regularly, the phone for me is, I'm a phone person.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But the challenge, I think that the challenge, Martin, I'm sorry to get you on the way. The challenge, I think, for my friend is that the teammates or team members, because she's the leader, she's the team leader, they actually use the fact of the low bandwidth problem not to turn on the camera. And this way they could probably be wearing pajama in the meeting, and not showing themselves, and being more protected in the amount of engagement and involvement in the meeting, because they're getting paid anyway, so why bother? And that's the kind of challenge I was throwing into the table.
Okay, so there's some tech involved there, right? Maybe there's a tech challenge there, but the tech challenge there is a minuscule fraction of the problem, right? That problem is a culture problem. And a meeting that means that you don't have to engage. If you're running a conversation where there's no reason to be on video and you can be lying in your bed with your pajamas, you're doing homeschool the way that my 17-year-old is doing remote school, right? He gets into his math class and he logs in and he turns it on, then he turns off all the lights and he covers under his bed and he turns the camera off and he's like, I'm learning math. And I'm like, no, you're not. But that's okay, because they aren't asking him to do anything else but beyond turn that on. And if in this meeting scenario, like what Pilar was talking about, you come onto the video and we do something like we say, okay, we're all here at different times of the day. Show me with your hands, where are we? And your time of day, if this is early and this is late, right? Like, so for me, it's like here. And this is a meeting where I can do this half in pajamas. It's not the pajamas part. That's actually the problem. The problem is there was no other reason to have to engage. So for your friend, what would engagement look like? What would they be doing in that meeting that would show that they are interested in the work? Like, what are they replying to? How are they interacting with each other? And if she doesn't start there, then the video's noise.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I think what is the work that they're engaging with? So is the meeting work to them? Because they might not see the relevance in a meeting. So I'm just taking I know there's always people that don't want to work and want to be lazy, but I'm going to put that to the minority. I'm thinking that the problem might be a different one. So if I don't want to really be present, because I think that's what maybe sometimes not switching the video off is a way of not being present for some. If I don't want to be present, why don't I want to be present? Is it because this is not relevant to me? Is it because this is not part of my work? And then there's the bit of, well, if I want to be in my pajamas, is that a problem? If I don't want to dress up or whatever, if I don't want to have a better background, I don't know, whatever it is that an issue? So I think Elise, that asking, what does engagement look like? I think that's a great question, because if engagement means that after the meeting we do things differently, that's a great output. It doesn't matter whether people had their videos on or not, but we can all be having our videos on, being like this all the time, great, and nothing changes after the meeting. Yeah. What is the point of that?
And do you think it would be fair to say that the types of issues that you've just articulated and identified, they're very similar to problems that already existed in face-to-face meetings? So people fiddling with phones, people working on iPads on topics that have nothing to do with content of the meeting, people zoning out mentally, people showing up late, people leaving early. They're all manifestations of of the same underlying problems of people interaction and people productivity. Do you think that's a fair comment?
That's Martin. I think, you're right there, obviously, but the power of what I call face-to-face technology, the power of presential technology is tremendous, right? Because obviously there's always a value on sharing physical presence, because after the meeting, you will be able to do what you like, having coffee, having this conversation, having this chat. So that's kind of technology that you have with physical presence. It's really probably best suited for their culture, for their organizational culture. And when they face the fact that they have to work remotely, and then that's cameras off, and then there's no point in meeting remotely.
I think it's amplified, Martin, to your point. I think we've seen, and this has always been the case, but I think it's been even more prominent and more visible now, that any culture problem or any issue we have before we move to remote gets amplified. And also things that we're doing really well also get amplified. So there is that amplification all of a sudden. There's also the classic, we can't work in the same way. So if before we had lots of meetings and that's how we got most of our work done, this is not, well, it's probably not going to work as well. We're going to have to change something, either the cadence or the number of how we can't just transport how we were working before. So I think we've got to understand that it's a different medium. We are apart from each other, and that has its disadvantages and its advantages. So how are we going to make the most out of it? So I think if before we were always present when we were physically present, is there another way of feeling our presence online when we're not present at the same time in front of a camera or at a meeting?
Yeah.
So, and why is presence important also? I think that's a good question of, is presence important? What kind of presence is important? And then you get into like this philosophical debate, which is where it gets really exciting and interesting. So I'll pass over to Elise before I go off on one.
I know. Can we talk about like facilitating in multiple spectrums of time and like all of that? Well, wouldn't that be fun? But on the productivity front, we don't have to guess. So you're 100% correct, Martin. There is new research, because 2020 has been a playground for the researchers and the academics, that shows that whatever your effectiveness was before the pandemic, you move it online and it's lightly magnified. So if you ran terrible meetings before and then you put them on video, turns out those are still bad meetings, intermediated with a camera. Exactly. I think one of the things that's been really wonderful to see is that because it is a shift and people encountered things like the things you're talking about, with the insurance group, and they don't have video, and you feel how awful that is in a new way, that has been disruptive for enough groups that they're actually seeking to run better meetings and find new ways of collaborating. And it's been that habit busting catalyst that, those of us who try and help others do these things well have been waiting for in some ways. It's like, oh my gosh, status quo is broken. We have an opportunity to help some people do some better things. What a lousy way to get it. But
yeah. But you prompt me to think about a problem that I habitually encountered before we all went full digital, let's say, and before COVID. And that was the idea of, so how do we actually evaluate our meetings? Do we pay attention either before, during, or after to the quality that the meetings are going to be held to, and to just how productive they are? So do you feel that in the digital space, have we improved that in any way? Have we become more reflective? Have we become more precise about measuring our productivity or the quality of our interactions? Or is it still the same that we're doing them, but we're not paying enough attention to what's the quality of what we're actually doing?
I think we can pay more. So what I see is that people are paying more attention to why they're meeting. Whether you define that as, so if a meeting is productive, so if we all decide that what we really need at this moment is to feel connected as people, and we have half an hour where we just chat, or where we actually had met to talk about, I don't know, say we've met to make a decision, and at the end of that meeting we haven't made that decision, but we all feel much better together and more connected, and even some people might have been feeling lonely. Is that a meeting that was productive? It wasn't what we set out to do, but it had another outcome. So what's always been different in the online space for distributed teams is that in the workspace, we have a meeting with an agenda and with a fixed output, or a very fixed thing we want to get out that is business related. In the online space, when you have a meeting, the social connection is also really important, because you're not getting that anywhere else. So you have to look at meetings differently. And then you can either decide that this meeting is for this one for this one for this, or actually, as long as we get something when the time we're together and nobody thinks it was a complete waste of time, does it matter how productive they are? I don't know. I think it will completely depend.
Interesting thought, Elise. Your thoughts on that particular one?
Well, as you may know, I'm a huge fan of productive outputs on meetings. I'm also a huge fan of connection, though, and I think that every meeting should have both, to some degree. Just because you've always got more than one person in the room, right? And for somebody in that room, actually getting something done was in fact why they've shown up. And if you declare that something to be done is, hey, we're here to connect, that is 100% beautiful. And the fact that people are doing that more and more, I love the random coffee date idea, where like you match up, everybody gets a roll of the dice, and the CEO ends up working with the new person in customer success, and they have coffee, and I love those things. Those are so great. And I think that the idea that wasn't happening before in the workplace is also not entirely accurate. Like the weekly team meeting is just one of the dreaded things, because there are so many leaders who had no idea what to do with it. So they'd get the team into a room, and it would be kind of like, hey, what's going on? Well, let's go around the room and talk about things. And then they'd leave, which was kind of social, but largely a waste of everybody's time. And you're right, people are better at acknowledging the value of the social part of it now that they've moved remote and they need it more.
So do you think, Elise, have we become more adept or more focused on quantifying the productivity, given that we've moved online? Are we getting better at that thing?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Okay. I think what people are doing, and what I'm seeing a lot more of, is they are asking whether meetings are useful or productive, and how the number and method of meeting is impacting overall job satisfaction. So we're hearing a lot more from HR departments about, my teams are complaining about all of the meetings that they're having. Now, the leadership blind spot thing still absolutely applies, because we are hearing more from HR departments than we are from senior leadership. And which generally means it's come up in an employee engagement survey of some kind. They've gotten complaints about too many meetings, and then they've been asked to investigate it, or you go solve that, because that's everybody else's problem. Which is, of course, sad, because the leadership is the folks who set the tone, and they tend to actually be running most of those awful meetings. But
that's interesting. And tell me something about this, the fact that how would you what would be the tips you could give to a manager like my friend, in order to create safe space in the team, for the team to address these questions? Is, are we really needing these kinds of meetings? Is what's really necessary for this team to be productive? Are we, that kind of safety for the team members to be able to voice to their leader, say, oh, we don't really need to meet, this is a waste of time?
Pilar, do you want to tell them about remote team agreements?
Well, I would go even, well, that is, yeah, but the remote team agreement for me comes into where are the places where we have our conversations and where are the places where we have the work. So if somebody thinks that their meetings are not productive or is starting to think that people are disengaged in the meetings, maybe you are having too many meetings. And the nice thing about the online space is that we don't have to interact all the time in real time, that there's these wonderful things that technology has given us so that we can connect in between meetings. And in fact, a lot of people do their best work in between meetings. So there's, and this is where the productivity is coming from, to be honest, I think. I mean, I haven't seen the numbers broken down, but I do wonder if it's the fact that people can work away from each other that is allowing people to be more productive at work, regardless of what's happening in meetings. So I think that a lot of people might be better thinkers when they're on their own. A lot of people might be might have better discussions when they're only with one person and not 5 or 6 or 10 or 12, like some teams. So it's finding what are the interactions that people need and breaking those down. Do they need interactions that are online that are asynchronous? Do they need interactions in pairs? Do they need interaction in a big group? Do they need interaction with the manager? And then design from that. It's really difficult because you do need a high degree of psychological flexibility and work maturity, and people who like to think about this stuff, because some people might not even want to think about it. I just want to get on with my work. Yeah. So I think that it can get really complex, but it's where are the spaces that people can interact that are not a meeting? And then when we have the meeting, then it's really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's awesome though about that, because you're right, it can. And but in teams, if you have somebody who is jazzed about the idea of working on the communication architecture, which is basically what we talk, how we talk about that, right? Like,
yeah,
which kinds of conversations and record keeping and interactions are we doing through what medium, in what time scales, right? So you look at the entire system as if it were energy or water. You know, you want to keep it flowing. You don't want to flood anybody. You don't want to let anybody be in the desert where they're not getting what they need. How do you get the right trickles moving through that system in the right places in the right way? You don't have to be the boss to be the person who maps all of that out. I think the part where the leadership person comes in, where that manager comes in, is once you've got a sense of what those pieces are and you have gathered the group's input on what they need, right? Like, please don't drown me, I can't handle it, I need to focus 5 hours a day, or yes, keep it coming, I just need to be fed. And everybody's a little different.
Yes.
Get them together, and the leader leads the bit where they reconcile those things into an agreement. And they say, okay, given all of this, we're going to use Slack or Teams or whatever in this way. And we're going to meet on Wednesdays, and we're never going to meet on Fridays, or whatever those agreements are going to be. But in a lot of ways, what meetings are and what a lot of teamwork are is making the right promises to each other. And then, evaluating whether those are working. And then using those to coordinate everything else you do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So in this sense, Elise and Pilar and Martin, please step in. What I realize now is that probably it's the organization who is not properly supporting this manager. My friend is not being properly supported by their organization in order to have this kind of work analysis or meeting flow analysis that all organizations should have in first place, right?
Is it about the organization, or is it also about, I think it's also about self-awareness also, I'm thinking about the person, who's the person leading their team, if they're taking on what Elise is describing, which is seeing how we pull together and just getting the team to gather around certain things. And what I'm seeing also is that sometimes we will lead through our preference. And if we are someone who really gets a lot of work done in meetings, then likely as a leader, we're going to see those meetings as being crucial and important. If you're someone like me that likes to be behind the screen and typing, you're more likely to be more of a only meet when absolutely necessary person. So the self-awareness, the team, and then the organization. But I think you're right, because there's a lot of technology available that hasn't been either made accessible in a very simple way, or enabled people to use it. So people have some of this technology at their fingertips, but they haven't been given the space or the skills to learn how to use it as well. So it works in all those three levels. And I think that the funny thing is that there has to be so much communication between the three and so much alignment that, for it to work wonderfully.
Yeah. What kind of technology were you thinking, Pilar?
Anything. So I'm thinking from the typical. So I'm specifically thinking that a lot of organizations have Microsoft 365, which they know as Teams, and which they know as Team, which is the place where we meet. Only today I was running a workshop where I introduced them to something within that system, which is Planner, which is like Trello, which is a workflow Kanban board, and they don't have access to it, probably because no one's asked for it. and you can turn things on and off in the Microsoft environment, and you don't want to turn everything on because people go crazy, but it just takes someone to go, that I really need that to help my team be more productive, more aligned, whatever. So there's that might be the specific thing. So it's an organizational piece from there, I think. And then because that gives you the support and it gives you the ability to create your ecosystem. But you can also create your ecosystem with email and video meeting. It really depends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, technology's advanced, but there were remote teams doing fabulous remote work for decades without a whole bunch of the stuff that's in here right now. So, the simplest place to start is to literally hold the conversation, right? Hey, is this working for us as a team? What else might work better? What are some things that you think we ought to try? Let's make a new agreement about how we're going to work and run it as an experiment. 30 days. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
You don't need anyone inside your team to do that.
Yeah. Shouldn't the organization be sort of, forcing these to all team managers to be able to do that kind of exercises?
Change doesn't always work best when it comes top down. There are sometimes places where if small teams show the example and lead the way, that can be a great example and a great proof point that allows the organization to then spread it. And unless there's, some insurance-backed legal prohibition on working more effectively, they should grab it and go for it.
Yeah. I think where senior leadership where the top-down approach can work is the top role modeling and showing how they're doing it and saying, look, we are doing our meetings like this, and and all that level of transparency, which is what remote work needs. It needs some level of transparency. I think that's where the top-down can come in handy. But having said that, especially what I've seen is especially when people are a bit like, okay, all this is new. Tell me what to do. Tell me what I need to use to do this. Tell me what I need. So maybe, enforcement is not good, but some very narrow guidelines sometimes are welcome, with the caveat that, if that's not working for you, you can go off and do whatever. Yeah. So I think that quite narrow guidelines sometimes are welcome.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Hello, could I just could I pick up on something, given we're about a half an hour in at this point?
Yeah.
And Elise, particularly, I'd like to loop back to something that you said at the very beginning, and just try and connect all of the dots of the conversation. But at the very outset, you mentioned the phrase "train ride to burnout." Okay, and I'm just wondering, in the context of productivity. So the second point that was made, both of you made the point at the very beginning, that productivity seems to have increased as we've gone more towards the online environment. But on the one hand, if we've got increasing productivity, and if on the other hand, we're on a railroad track to potential burnout, how sustainable actually is what we are currently doing, and how long do you think we might be able to sustain it before we might need to do what you've just talked about at the very end, which I think is thinking more carefully about what we're doing and more deliberately building our solutions to meet our exact requirements. So I'm trying to connect the very beginning of our conversation to the last point that I think I picked up from both your contributions. How sustainable is all of this?
So I can start. We're not doing remote work. I just want to go back, and we haven't been doing in the main online collaboration. We're still doing working from home in the middle of a crisis during lockdown a lot of the time. So I think that, and that really needs to be spelled out for exactly the reason that you're saying, because we don't want to carry that forward. We don't want it to look like that in anyone's mind, and we don't want any of what has become a habit in this time that can become a habit, and then we're going to take it forward. So how it looks like for some people, and we are hearing this, is not sustainable. However, I do think that a lot of people are realizing that and are starting to develop strategies, because productivity is not productive if I burn out. And it also means that, you need to, of course, you want to be in it for the long term. So I think that what's happening is a lot of people are realizing, and they're starting to go, hang on, is this what we should be doing? And I can't do this for 2 or 3 months. So that's, Elise, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. And sustainable is tricky. I think a tricky word when applied to human systems, because we are so amazingly adaptable. Right? Like we live in sweat factories and all kinds of terrible conditions, and many in the office conditions had been inhumane in many ways for years and years. So can we persist? Sure, right? We can persist. Do we thrive going on this way? No. And so, and in some ways, like the train ride to burnout is kind of glib, because it really only applies to the people who have that choice. Right? I can choose to say this is enough, and I'm going to back off. But we've been a remote first company since we were founded. We're 11 years old now, and I started working remote when my first son was born. And I'm not going to tell you how old he is, but he's quite old. And and just now, because we've been home now a year with our kids in our 1-bathroom house, doing work from home with all of the books and everything like in the house, and we are looking to lease an office. And it'd be like the first time we've had an office in forever, because just enough. Just enough.
That's really interesting.
But we have that choice, right? We have that choice. So I think the onus really is on leaders who are in that position of choice to recognize that what we're doing is not about thriving. Right? It's not the way in which you get long-term health in your teams, in yourself, in your business. So yes, you can persist it, but where are the 4-day work weeks? How do we bring those back?
Yeah, and going back to productivity as well, and to the remembering that this is not remote work, is working from home, because remote work is not about working from home. That was one option that some people had. And so people who felt more productive working from home did that. And I think, just going back to the organizational piece, actually, for organizations and for people in organizations who can do something about it, to remember that there are co-working spaces that will be, my co-working space is still open. I don't go to it because I think, I'll just stay at home. But there are people using it who can't work at home, who really can't. So they're still going to the co-working, near home offices, and all the other stuff that we haven't even thought of before. And I think that's where, if we want to continue doing this kind of work in a happy fashion, then we need to look at that also, that it's not always home or an office with a long commute. There's a lot of stuff. Plus, and Elise starting to mention the 4-day week. Come on, people, this is an opportunity not to just look at whether we work remotely or not. This is an opportunity to look at all the stuff that we've just been doing and doing and doing forever, because that's the way we do it, and go, do we really need to be doing that? Isn't it time we just need to think about whether we want to do it? We don't have to change it. but just think and stop. Do we really need to be working in this way? And this is the time to start thinking about that, I think. My optimist mind.
Okay, guys, let me throw in the digital tools for collaboration on the last bit of our conversation, if you wish. Martin, you've been recently certified as a group map facilitator. What it is that you, as a consultant, now can offer to companies with a digital tool like group map?
Yeah, I think the something like group map, for me it provides two main significant benefits. It provides a tangible way for people to interact in varied ways online. So that's one big thing for me. There are multiple ways to interact. The second big thing that I think it offers is it's the takeaway, so that when all of the interactive work, the inputs are all done, they're all recorded, they're all captured in a structured way, and the tool allows you then to output those or to put out those outputs, if you like, in a measured and structured way. That means you don't have to reinvent, reinterpret, re-enter. So I think from a workflow point of view, to move then from one meeting event to a next meeting event to a next, or to branch out into multiple other connected meetings, I think becomes significantly easier than it would have been in the past. My second observation, if I broaden it beyond the group map experience, so if we look at the work that Elise's team does with Lucid meetings, look at meeting quality and the way that it provides survey opportunities, and then look at HouseSpace that we covered in the book, Paul. But when you look at these different tools, what I find really intriguing about them is all of them do certain things in similar ways, but all of them do very different things as parts of an overall workflow. And I think the ability to have them integrated in an entire platform to manage our online, offline, remote, in-house interactions, I think is phenomenally powerful. It's where the sum of the parts adds up to much more than what you get from them individually. So the collective use of these tools, particularly the four that we've covered in the book, I think makes it really, really powerful. And I suppose the skill from the facilitator's point of view is to be able to use them in an integrated way. But then the challenge, I guess, from management teams' point of view, it goes back to a point that I think Pilar made earlier. It's this idea of thinking about what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and not perpetuating habits that we've now established during COVID and thinking that those habits are the new way of doing remote working. For me, that's possibly one of our biggest takeaways from our conversation this morning. It's that we've been following habit now for 9 months or a year, and there's a big risk for all of us that we think, oh, we've arrived. Here's the new working paradigm. And you'd be saying, oh, we have a lot more thinking to do to bring us to a real new paradigm that will work best for everybody. That's my sense of it anyway.
Absolutely. Elise, Pilar, how about digital tools for collaboration? Would the pandemic be a big opportunity for this adoption of these tools?
I mean, obviously teams have adopted more tools than they did before. And it varies based on the team, right? In terms of how far they're taking that. Like Pilar is mentioning, pretty much everybody grabbed either Teams or Slack, right? They found some way to do some asynchronous communication, but very much it was, we need to get to a place where our communication needs are satisfied. And then we need to focus on filling insurance claims, writing software, because reworking their architecture and playing with their internal tech is always a cost center. It's always a detraction from whatever they think they actually need to be doing. It's always a saw sharpening activity. And most folks are way too busy cutting down the trees. So would you agree with that one, Pilar?
Yeah, I think some people have adopted them, have played with them, have sometimes ditched them, sometimes gone back to it. I think what I've discovered that is a real goldmine for collaboration is just the Google ecosystem. And what I've discovered is that many companies who were already using it, like they were using Google Docs to do documents or whatever, or they were using the slides for presentations. Those documents are amazing for collaboration because you can put comments in there because you've got versioning. And instead of, for example, only using Google Slides when you have to do a PowerPoint, you can use it to put thoughts in there, and you can use it to scribble stuff. You can use it to upload pictures of what you're thinking, of what you're seeing. And I think that, again, it's what have we got that we can use? And what does collaboration mean? Because it's also collaboration is not just about getting together, but about sharing what we're thinking, sharing why we decide certain things, sharing our learning. These very simple tools are already there, and there's a lot that can be done with that. So I'm going back. I've stopped. I don't know many tools, to be honest, but I see what people have, and I think, well, how can we use that for connection as much as for productivity also?
No, absolutely.
And I think it's different depending on where you sit in the ecosystem, right? So
yes,
for facilitators, and especially facilitators who have been working on more complex facilitation, Google Docs is probably not going to cut it for you, especially at any kind of scale, right? For an internal team thing, sure. So the facilitator world has become much more mature, and the consultant world has become much more mature in their understanding of some of these higher order tools, right? These tools that do more specific things at higher levels of productivity. We're seeing that, across the board with tools like Coda, which is fancier than Google Docs, more structured, but not all the way structured like something like a group map or a Power Noodle or one of these others. Yeah, so there are these spectrums of things that the people who then advise teams when they go look for the next thing are starting to embrace in ways that they didn't before.
Yeah.
So we shall see. But there's also been this huge explosion, like ginormous explosion, like hundreds of new, like, hey, let's put videos on a cool background and bump into each other. Things are popping up all over the place. So who knows what's going to settle out of that.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Let's bring this conversation to a close now, I think, because otherwise we'll get too many minutes on video for our viewers to watch the replay. So just a reminder of the book. Elise is also a co-author besides Martin here, Beyond Virtual Meetings. You type it on Amazon. It's the only one when you show up with Beyond Virtual Meetings. Pilar and Elise, do you want to share where our viewers can find you? Obviously, we'll have this on our LinkedIn post, but anyway.
Yes, virtualnotdistant.com, and the 21st Century Work-Life podcast is where I show up more often, but connect on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. Pilar Orti. Oh, you've got it there.
And you can find our work on LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, I am on LinkedIn, but on lucidmeetings.com.
Okay. Martin, thank you so much for co-hosting this with me. Elise, Pilar, it was really a pleasure, and I hope that we see each other sometime soon, if not virtually, at least face-to-face. I would dream about that.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a blast.
Thanks, ladies.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Great catching up. Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.